Akbar, the third Mughal emperor. Sir William Sleeman claimed, "Akbar has always appeared to me among sovereigns what Shakespeare was among poets." And that neatly sums up for all the rest of us who've studied him how extraordinary Akbar truly was. If you look at it one way, Akbar was a foreigner in India. He had not a drop of Indian blood in his veins. But what does that mean anyway? And isn't it ultimately all about your character and how you end up living your life that counts? And Akbar made it count. On his father's side, he was a direct descendant in the 7th generation of Temur the Lame and Genghis Khan. He ended up ruling one of the most significant and magnificent empires Indian history has ever seen. In fact, at that time, Mughal Empire was the richest empire in the world. The other two great contemporary empires in the world at the time were the Safavid Empire and the Ottoman Empire. Richard M. Eaton tells us that according to an observer in 1615, Ottoman Empire had an annual income of 45 million silver coins. The Safavid Empire had of 15 million silver coins, and the Mughal Empire had an annual income of 120 million silver coins. But that wasn't the empire Akbar had inherited. In fact, when Akbar became the Badshah on the sudden death of his father Humayun in January 1556, Akbar was easily the weakest contender among all other contenders for power over Delhi and the area. There was Sikandar Shah in Punjab, Adil Shah in Bihar, Kashmir and Sindh were independent, and so were Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Orissa. The Rajput clans were independent, and the Deccan Sultanate to the south was mighty in its own right. In short, you wouldn't have put your money on him. But that's why we love underdogs, don't we? Because they remind us that there is always hope. And despite all odds, we do always stand a chance, however slim it might be. Humayun himself had only just recaptured control over Delhi and Agra and re-established Mughal presence in India after more than a decade, and within 6 months he tripped from the stairs of his library at Deenpana. Humayun was going down the steep stairs of his library when he heard the muezzin's call for the namaz prayer. It was Humayun's habit that whenever he heard the muezzin's call, he bowed to touch his head to the ground, wherever he was, as a mark of devotion. This time he turned to bow his head on the stairs, tripped while doing so on the hem of his robes, tumbled down the stairs and died 3 days later, leaving the 13-year-old Akbar the Badshah of a new fledgling empire that was still to find any stability. There is a lot to be said about Akbar, and I surely want to take my time discussing the details, and I'm sure you too don't want me to rush through it and just make a 10-minute video. Therefore, I'll be going slow, savoring the details, and in this part today, we'll explore Akbar's childhood. So more videos will follow. Let's start with his birth. 15th October 1542 is the accepted date of birth of Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar. However, according to my research, Humayun's Ewer-bearer Jauhar claimed in his memoirs that Akbar was actually born on a different date. So the story goes that Hamida Banu Begum, Akbar's mother, who was at the time only 15 years old, gave birth to Akbar on a night of full moon, Shaban 14, 949, equivalent to Thursday, November 23, 1542. Humayun conferred on his son the name Badruddin, which means full moon of religion, coupled with Muhammad and Akbar signifying very great. Hence, Badruddin Muhammad Akbar. So why do we have a different date and name in all the official records now, be it by Badani or Abul Fazl, and when did he become Jalaluddin from Badruddin? In his early years, Akbar had an unusually difficult and unpredictable, outright dangerous life. He was born when his parents had lost their empire to Sher Shah Suri, who were homeless, on the run for their lives. Akbar was born at the fort of the local ruler of Umarkot. His parents soon left him alone, of course with some caretakers like his milk mothers, while they escaped to Persia. He was made to travel well over 500 kilometers on a horse from Kandahar to Kabul in bitter cold when he was only 2 years old and was a hostage of his uncle Kamran's. If Jauhar's memoirs are to be believed, Then his parents, milk mothers, loving aunts like Gulbadan and all of those, took these constant dangers upon the young prince's life as an inauspicious sign, and it was decided, in order to frustrate the evil intentions of hostile astrologers, to hide Akbar's real birth date, and thus it was shifted from Shaban 14th to Rajab 5th. This was easy to achieve because Akbar had practically lived a remote life away from a big court, so hiding details was easy. Rajab 5th translates to October 15th, and this became the accepted date. But remember, his name was Badruddin because he was born on full moon. November 23 was full moon, October 15th was not, and hence his name changed to Jalaluddin, which means splendor of religion. Source of this info is in the description below. Humayun celebrated Akbar's birth by distributing a pod of musk. That's all he had. He was a penniless, kingdomless king at the time. As a child, Akbar was ferociously fun and restless. Unlike an elegant imperial Timurid prince learning multiple languages and mathematics and astrology and calligraphy, memorizing the Quran, Akbar was flighty and spent his time outside in the wild, obsessively watching pigeons fly and running alongside camels and dogs, taming bull elephants in their ferocious temper, hunting tigers, cheetahs, lions in Indian jungles. A wild kid with a blazing energy, and all of this uncontrollable energy and thirst to experience his physical world led him to get his tutors fired one after another because they all failed to control him enough to even teach him to read and write, leading to the fact that Akbar was illiterate all his life. But at 13, in the middle of his distracted pigeon racing and hunting sessions, Akbar suddenly found himself Badshah. And out of all the tigers ready to leap at him, Hemu, a general of Adil Shah, a short, puny man but a great military strategist, was his biggest threat. Hemu had won 22 battles and crowned himself Raja Hemchandra Vikramaditya. Smart and quick, he took Agra as soon as Humayun died, and he took Delhi from the Mughal general Tardi Beg, who basically just panicked and abandoned Delhi. That's when Bairam Khan and Hemu met on the field of Panipat, where barely 30 years ago, Babur had won his epic battle over Ibrahim Lodi and set up the Mughal Empire in India. Hemu commanded an intimidating army of 50,000 cavalry and 500 war elephants. At the time, North India was suffering severely from consecutive droughts. There was a severe shortage of food, which had led to too many deaths, and by contemporary accounts had forced people to cannibalism. At that time, Hemu's war elephants were fed on rice, oil, and sugar. When Hemu's pampered but ferocious elephants met Bairam Khan's army, you still wouldn't have put your money on Akbar. But then a chance arrow hit Hemu straight in the eye and decided the fate of the battle, of the Mughals, and of Indian history. Akbar was now the king of Delhi and Agra. When the half-dead Hemu was brought to Akbar's feet, after that stray arrow struck Hemu miraculously in the eye and lost him the battle, it is said that Bairam Khan wanted Akbar to behead Hemu and become a Ghazi. But Akbar refused and Bairam did the job himself. The truth is, we will never know what actually happened. The records were made much after this incident happened, and it's possible Akbar may have changed the story later out of guilt at killing a helpless yet skillful man like Hemu. At the time, Akbar was too young to refuse such a powerful man like Bairam Khan, so he might as well have done the job. We don't know. Bairam Khan was a powerful, scary man. We'll talk about him in a moment. Now that Akbar's biggest threat was gone, albeit more by luck than by skill, the Mughal Empire, small, tottering to its feet, was his. And so were Delhi and Agra. But being still a young boy of just 13, Akbar was still more interested in hunting tigers and flying pigeons, while the administration was run by his regent, his Vakil, Bairam Khan. Akbar was still in the loving, shielded life of a young prince, surrounded by and coddled by the women of his family, his milk mothers like Jiji Anga, Mahamanga, his mother Hamida Banu, his aunt Gulbadan. Even Humayun's other wives like Bega Begum adored him. He had a warm, loved childhood in the company of the women in the harem, and a raucous one playing with his kokas like Azim, Adam, Zain. Mughal princes, Mirzas as they were called, had an Atalik appointed to them. The role of the Atalik was to educate and guide the prince, like a father, into navigating the complicated and dangerous world of Mughal politics and administration. An Atalik was not in a role like that of Akbar's tutors, whom he got carelessly exhausted one after another with his disobedience. An Atalik was a guardian, a figure of authority for the prince, perhaps the most important male figure in his life, and depending on the age of the prince, his Atalik helped him keep the empire's best interests at heart. Akbar's first Atalik was Khwaja Jalal al-Din Mahmud. His next Atalik was Munim Khan. In a way, Ataliks were the male form of milk mothers. Bairam Khan had been a loyal Mughal servant since Babur's time. A Persian Shia, Bairam Beg was his original name. Bairam Beg started low in the Mughal ranks as Humayun's Mohardar, seal bearer, but rose higher than the higher-ranking warlords who'd served Mughals from Babur's times. He was in the group of people who went to Persia with Humayun. Khan was a respectable title bestowed on him, and that's when he became Bairam Khan. His power now as Akbar's Vakil was formidable, unchallengeable. Even Akbar, if you read the contemporary texts, was scared of overturning Bairam Khan's decisions or choices. It is now that internal politics of the Mughal Empire has its first ever example with different factions jostling for the king's favor. Understandably, one faction was Bairam Khan's and the other was the one resenting him. This other faction included all the women of Akbar's family and his foster family. Foster family were the milk mothers' families. This is what characterizes Mughal Empire. Women were not pawns or prizes in politics like they were in other parts of the world. They were powerful, independent, active politicians. They decided, they argued, they played politics. They were even diplomats in power feuds. Akbar's foster family was called Atka Khail. They were his milk mothers and their families. The most prominent one being Jiji Anga's family, her husband Shamsuddin Atka Khan and son Aziz. Another prominent foster family was Mahamanga's, her husband and her infamous son Adam Khan. In the early part of Akbar's reign, this is the main aspect. Other people trying to control the empire, and Akbar being easy to lead on account of his young age or his extreme love and respect for his family, including foster family. Two of the most famous ones being when Adam Khan was sent to bring Malwa under the Mughal fold, which was at the time ruled by Baz Bahadur. Having won an easy victory over Baz Bahadur's army, who by the way panicked and fled when the Mughals attacked. The Mughal army under Adam Khan massacred every Hindu as well as Muslim who were taken prisoner. Badoni, a contemporary historian and part of the Mughal camp, was horrified at the slaughter conducted by Adam Khan. Aghast, he tells us, Adam Khan had the captives brought before him and troop after troop of them put to death so that their blood flowed river upon river. It was a rule that all the treasure taken from the defeated party was to be sent to the emperor. But Adam Khan, too confident of Akbar's brotherly love for him, and perhaps also because he was arrogant, sent a paltry set of gold and elephants to Akbar and kept the rest for himself. Akbar did find out about this and rode to Malwa himself to surprise Adam Khan. Mahamanga, Adam Khan's mother, sensing Akbar's rage, she was a very good politician, tried to talk sense into her son and even got 2 slave women killed, so there wouldn't be any witnesses of Adam Khan's excesses. Having thus escaped from paying for his arrogant entitlement, pretty soon after this, Adam Khan, in a fit of jealous rage, killed Shamsuddin Atka Khan, another member of Akbar's foster family. Perhaps assuming that Akbar would never harm his own Koka, his foster brother. It was at this point that Akbar actually got Adam Khan executed on the spot that Akbar broke out of his foster family's shell. And that's when another phase of his reign started. A reign where he was the undoubted boss, the much revered emperor who's won everyone's respect and fear. This was also a time of serious expansion of the Mughal Empire. When we talk about the expansion of the Mughal Empire in its early years, Surely a lot of claim, rightly so, goes to Bairam Khan and the role he played as an able Mughal general leading Akbar's armies when Akbar was just a boy. But that is not to say that eventually Akbar himself was not a military genius who didn't fully fathom the powerful role he played. He did. He expanded the Mughal empire widely even after Bairam Khan died. Akbar invested in technical improvement of the weapons in use at the time, like gunpowder, something his grandfather famously used against Ibrahim Lodi at the Battle of Panipat. Akbar also improved upon the design of the basic musket and developed lighter-weight cannon so it was easy to transport it to battle. He even worked upon functional designs of rockets and swivel guns, which could be fitted on top of camels and elephants in battle. But military genius is not all about killing your opponents and leaving behind bloodied masses of dead armies onto fields. It is also about winning without warfare. Akbar understood that. And how exactly did that work? The answer is Kamargha. There is unclarity whether it's Kumargha or Kamargha, and that obviously arises from the fact that in Persian, vowels were not very clearly used. But let's go with Kumargha for now. So what was Kumargha? Kumarghas were ring hunts near target territory, that is, territory that Akbar wanted to bring under the Mughal Empire. While it looked like Akbar was just out on a regular hunt, Kumargha was actually a psychological tactic that everyone understood, including the target territory near which the hunt was organized. Everyone knew what was actually happening. Everyone knew what looked like a regular hunt was not a regular hunt. It was a frightening display of Akbar's soldiers' skills, their weapons, their numbers, their enormous power. The hunt was organized to display to the target territory Akbar's wealth, power, army. And the fact that they were near your territory told you he wants to talk and he's willing to accept a peaceful surrender without needing to use his army. In most cases, you surrendered. Another wise thing about Akbar was that he intuitively understood the nobility's humiliation at surrendering, and at the same time, his own need to tie together an empire that was more like a risky mosaic of different cultures, religions, languages, and heritages that India famously is and has always been. Instead of trying to foolishly homogenize it all under one identity, he let the local rulers rule, but under his name. This was more profitable for both the sides, and it was in this way that Akbar really created an imperial administration peopled by those who cared for their local areas and were loyal to the Mughal Empire. At this point, I feel like saying that this creates an impression that Akbar was a peaceful man who avoided killing wherever he could. But saying that would not be true. While we cannot call him a bloodthirsty maniac, there have been enough instances in his life where he did show us a shocking lack of mercy. The massacres of Malwa and of Gondwana did happen under his watch. Even some cases of him controlling fierce animals do show a certain lack of mercy, which at this point we can also recall the battle he caused between the sannyasis, which led to so many deaths, and according to contemporary reports, Akbar took delight in the deaths of sannyasis and his own soldiers. So that was military. Similarly, in terms of richness and revenue compared to how rich the Mughal Empire ultimately became, that was not the empire that Akbar had actually inherited. In fact, in the early years of his reign, there was a point when once Akbar wanted some money and he asked Munim Khan, who was managing funds, and Munim Khan told him that the imperial treasury didn't actually have the sum of money that Akbar wanted. How much money was it that he actually wanted? 17 rupees. This was when the empire's revenue and tax collection system were given a thorough shake-up. It was the same land revenue system that was in use since the time of Sher Shah Sur. It was a system based on estimates for tax based on land size, crop yield, market price. But in the 1560s, Akbar began collecting data on actual market prices and revenue rates of various crops. So, at that time, India was organized like this. Small villages grouped together into the tiniest official unit made one pargana. Many parganas together made up a Sarkar. Many Sarkars together made up a Subah, and many Subahs were managed by Subedar. Tax at the grassroots level was collected by zamindars who were mostly Hindus, and they were now made officers under the Mughal state. The land revenue was now collected not in crops but in cash, the copper dam, and this monetized the rural economy, and while it may sound simple, it revolutionized the Mughal economy. And it's not as if Akbar was not conscious of the greatness of his actions. In Akbari, he says, "It was the effect of the grace of God that I found no capable minister, otherwise people would have considered my measures had been devised by him." In reality, this is not entirely true. Akbar was surrounded by some extraordinary people, and yes, he did bring out the best in them. One can say he was at the right place at the right time, but I believe he was the right man at the right place at the right time. He brought together exceptional people to create the most spectacular empire in the world at the time, and a large credit for it goes to his ability to understand human nature, the ability that cannot be learned from books or be taught by tutors or atalics, an ability that was not limited by biases or fears of the other, but fueled by curiosity about human nature. And it was with this ability that he brought together a culturally diverse court that had painters like Dashwant, who was originally a lower caste man, Todarmal, who handled finances and revived tax systems, and who was originally a minister under Sher Shah Sur, Man Singh and his military genius, Badoni, Abul Fazl and Abdur Rahim's literary genius, and of course Mahesh Das, Birbar. And no, these were not 9 gems. There were no official 9 gems or Navratna. That's just a legend. India at this time, in the 16th century, was still a large, fragmented, distracted region with thick, untouched forests, teeming with tigers and snakes, who very frequently moved into villages as well. Life was not easy. I know we like to imagine our past as a pastoral idyll, but it wasn't like that. Maybe in really ancient times, but not really in the medieval times. The Portuguese were at this time already in India, and they were going quite strong in the western coast of India. They had taken over the fortified settlements from the Deccan Sultans, and they held good control over Goa, Bombay, Daman, Diu. In fact, their fleet controlled the mercantile traffic of the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf. No other European power had gained any footing on the soil of India by this time. In fact, the Portuguese were so powerful that Akbar had to take their permission before any ships from the Mughal Empire departed for the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. In fact, it's from the Jesuit reports of this time that we get a good physical description of Akbar in his youth as a fine-looking, broad-shouldered man, but bandy-legged, well-suited for horsemanship, and of a dark rather than fair complexion. His eyes are large and black, but with narrow openings, like those of a Tartar or Chinaman. He has a broad, open forehead, and his nose, except for a slight lump in the center, is straight. The nostrils are large, and on the left one there is a small wart. Like the Turks, he shaves his beard, but he wears a small, neatly trimmed mustache. In the 1560s, another very important thing happened in Akbar's life. In 1562, it was a cold January night, Akbar was hunting in the lands around Agra. He was somewhere in a village between Ajmer and Sikri when he came upon Qawwals, who were singing praises of Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti. Akbar was so enamored by the stories that he decided to visit the miraculous man and his shrine that very night. So he ordered his harem to come along and meet him on the way to the holy man. On the way, he received a request of Raja Bharmal for an audience. Raja Bharmal was a respected ally of the Mughals, so they met at Sanganer. Now, it's important to understand how the Rajputs were organized at this time. In the 16th century, Rajput kingdoms were mostly organized as clans like Rathors, Chauhans, Sisodias, Kachwahas, and not one area which was ruled over by one entity. And it had been so ever since the defeat of Prithviraj Chauhan by Muhammad Ghori in 1192. No one had been able to take over them, and they'd been largely independent, but they were mostly like small warring principalities. Kachwahas of Amer were one such. There was a dispute over the seat of Amer between Raja Bharmal and his brother Puranmal, who had somehow managed the support of the Mughal governor Mirza Sharafuddin Hussain. Bharmal, in order to remove Puranmal from the seat, sought Akbar's help by offering him his daughter in marriage. Now, contrary to popular belief, this wasn't the first example of Hindu-Muslim marriage in Indian history. The Ghoris and Tughlaqs before the Mughals did marry Hindu women. Rao Maldeo of Marwar married one of his daughters to Sultan Mahmud of Gujarat and another to Islam Shah Sur. And contrary to another popular belief, Bharmal's daughter, Harkabai, wasn't the only Hindu woman Akbar ever married. He also married the niece of Kalyanmal Rai of Bikaner, daughter of Rawal Har Rai of Jaisalmer, and the princess of Dungarpur. And obviously, in addition, Akbar had many more Muslim wives too. However, marital alliances with Hindus proved to be an awesome administrative and political strategy, because by marrying into the Kachwahas, Akbar won the lifetime loyalty of the Rajputs. The Rajputs became his strongest allies. Rajput soldiers and generals fought for the Mughal army. Marrying with Hindus also created another remarkable highlight of Akbar's reign: religious tolerance. The jizya tax was abolished, not as a direct result of the marriage, but the open-mindedness that comes with interacting with others who may not be like you. This also led to the famed religious gatherings where Akbar invited Hindus and Muslim clerics, Jains, Buddhists, Jesuits to discuss God, spirituality, and the right way of living, leading to ultimately two things. One, his disillusion with the purity of holy men. And second, Sulah-e-Kul, his answer to the best way a multicultural society like India can harmoniously live together. Sadly, most people still don't get it. In addition to abolishing the jizya tax on Hindus, Akbar ended slavery. He discouraged the abominable practices of sati and Jauhar. He raised the minimum marriageable age of boys and girls. With Bharmal's daughter, Akbar had two sons, Hassan and Hussain, but both of them died soon. Ultimately, Akbar had three sons, Salim, Murad and Danial, all three of them hopeless alcoholics and opium addicts. Murad and Danial died before Akbar because of alcohol and opium overdoses. Salim, perhaps because of his robust build, survived, and when Salim succeeded his father to the throne, he was called Jahangir. Understandably difficult to fill someone like Akbar's shoes, Jahangir never managed to be what his father was. In fact, very few ever since have. In 1605, Akbar died, and he is buried in Agra. The lengthier, detailed version of this biography of Akbar's would be on our podcast, Historia Maxima. Hope you enjoyed. You can support our work on Patreon, link in the description. Do click like and subscribe, share your opinions in the comments below, and I'll see you next Monday.